I'm surprised I haven't talked about Candace Owens up until this point on this channel, but the other day I saw a clip from her show and it absolutely disgusted me and it hit a bit close to home, and I couldn't resist talking about it. I'll link the clip in the description if you haven't seen it, and I suggest you do before watching this video any further. Anyways, I assume you have watched the video at this point, so let's move on. Fuck you. Just first and foremost, fuck you. I went to therapy up until a few years ago. It wasn't for me either, so I can relate on that front. Or perhaps I didn't click with the therapist I had. I don't know. Perhaps I would make more progress if I went back into therapy and had a different therapist. Who knows? But when I was in therapy, my therapist never ever told me that my feelings were the only thing that mattered, and that anything that happened to me wasn't my fault. She tried to help me come up with solutions to ameliorate my depression, or to improve my social skills. We often did mock conversations to practice my conversation skills. We were both actively working towards solutions for my poor social skills and my depression. Yes, we talked about things that might have played a factor into causing my severe social anxiety and depression, like certain life experiences I've had, and, me being autistic, but that wasn't the be-all, end-all of what we talked about. That was simply identifying possible causes of my social anxiety and depression. For example, during therapy, I would talk about certain experiences I had where I felt like I completely embarrassed myself. And when I have an embarrassing experience, my mind does not let me forget about that shit. I hold on to that memory for the longest fucking time and beat myself up over it. And in therapy, I told her about some of those experiences that I still beat myself up over, and she tried to come up with ways to help me move past those experiences, and also tried to help me come up with ways to not care as much about what other people think of me. And in the case of my autism, she tried to help me come up with ways to make it easier to socialize with people in spite of my neurodivergency. So yes, the therapist is there to listen to you discuss feelings that you struggle with, but that is not all they fucking do. They also help you come up with ways to overcome said feelings. And I really fucking hate the patronizing way she says, therapists tell you that no matter what you do in the world, it's not your fault because of some traumatic event you may have experienced at age 5. The way she fucking says that just shows a complete lack of regard for traumatic experiences one may have faced in their childhood. What if something absolutely horrible happened to someone during their childhood? Like, say, they're at the brunt of physical abuse, or they were molested, and it fucked them up as an adult. Horrible things like that aren't things that you just simply pick up the pieces and move on from, with no second thought. And those certainly aren't things that one goes to a therapist to talk about, just to simply seek validation, and be told that they're absolved of any responsibility for how they treat people and how they act. But this is what Candace Owens thinks, and she thinks that talking about your feelings produces weak people, or more importantly, it produces weak men. Being told to bottle up your emotions because you're a man is one of the worst attributes of toxic masculinity, and is one that has personally affected me throughout my life. When I was a boy, I had sayings ingrained into me like, boys don't cry, girls cry, man up, don't be like such a baby, don't cry like a girl. It was to the point where when a family friend, who was someone who I considered a grandfather, passed away, I struggled to cry in front of people over that, because I was afraid that would be putting my masculinity on the line. Men commit suicide at a higher rate than women, and telling men bullshit like, keep your emotions bottled up, no one wants to hear it, don't be weak, does way more harm than good. Harmful mindsets like this contribute to more men committing suicide. And of course, that's not the only factor, but perhaps if these men were at least just a little bit more comfortable in talking about their feelings, maybe, just maybe, some or a lot of these men would still be alive. And her saying, we should go back to the way things were when my grandfather was growing up, is absolutely fucking laughable. So what, you want segregation back? You would be separated from white people and not deemed as equal just on the basis of your skin color. But what makes this even more funny is on her Facebook, she wrote about her grandfather a few years ago. Her post says, my granddad grew up on a sharecropping farm in the segregated South. His first job was laying out tobacco to dry in an attic when he was 5 years old, each day before the crack of dawn. Growing up, the KKK would come around and shoot bullets into his home at night. So, Candace, is that the type of society that you want to go back to, where you had to fear for your life at the age of fucking 5 because some white supremacists with guns wanted you dead just on the basis of your skin color? I'm willing to bet that even your grandfather, if he's even still alive, wouldn't want to go back to the days when he was growing up. But she says that her grandfather is tough. He bottled up his emotions. He didn't even cry at his wife's funeral. It's almost like people process grief differently. Me personally, I was crying like a motherfucker at my grandmother's funeral, and I'm not ashamed whatsoever to admit that. She was my best friend, and even over 2 years later, her death is something I've not come to grips with. And if Candace Owens were in front of me, telling me how I'm a weak person for crying at my grandmother's funeral, I'm not a violent person, but it would take every fiber of my being to not smack her across the fucking face. Just recently, my great-aunt passed away, and I went to her wake, and my great-uncle, who was still alive, and is approaching 90, was also there, of course. He was married to her for 68 years. He held it together at the wake, but I went to his house for New Year's. Me and some cousins wanted to keep him company, because it was his first New Year's without his wife. After the New Year hit, I guess the realization hit him that this will be the first year without his wife is gone, and he started to cry. He watched his wife deteriorate from Alzheimer's from roughly 2008 to just last month. I'd say someone like that is well within their right to let their emotions out, and they are not weak for doing so. So Candace, I don't want to hear you say fucking anything about mental health the next time a major mass shooting happens. You and all these other conservatives are all the fucking same. You only pretend to care about mental health when a tragedy occurs because you value your precious Second Amendment more than you value human life. But when gun control debate isn't the center of the discourse, this is the kind of shit that you say about mental health and treatment. So fuck you. You're just a grifting piece of shit whose existence is solely to be a token for racists. That's all I have to say. Bye-bye.